My first question for you guys, what is the most harmful stereotype about homeless people that you have encountered?
So something that really bothers me is how a lot of people assume that homeless people are just lazy. They don't want to work. That's not really true at all because a lot of the people who are homeless, they actually do want jobs. But think about it, right? How are you supposed to get a job if you don't have like, an address to put on the application, or if you haven't showered in days because you don't have access to any water or any bathrooms, right? It's not that they don't want to work. The system makes it super hard for them to even try to get one. People say just get a job, but we don't give them what they need to make that possible. So most people would struggle in that situation no matter how hard they worked, right? So I say instead of judging, we should just try to understand what they're actually up against. We should take into consideration that they're not actually lazy, but rather they're stuck.
And another one that I hear a lot is that homeless people are just dangerous criminals and none of them are good people. And I think that this is wrong because many of them are just people who are trying to get back on their feet. They're homeless veterans, teens, or families who are struggling. And when we treat them like threats, it basically just makes it harder for them to receive any kind of care. Instead of us treating them like humans, they get treated just inhumane and they're not part of society at all, which is not right because we should see their humanity instead of judging them for wherever they sleep or wherever they eat or the hardships that they have to face because everyone has a story and some of us don't know what's going on in a person's life or why they ended up homeless in the first place. For my question, it is, how does social media shape the public's perception of homelessness for better or for worse?
I think that the media is responsible for painting the homeless people in a bad light, whether that be on the news where you hear about a homeless person who attacked someone in the park, or they show homeless tents, camps in a negative light, try to dehumanize people for sleeping on the bench. TikToks of people harassing these people just trying to make a living. I think that the media paints homeless people in a very negative light, in a light that we should try to change, because they are just people too, just trying to survive. They have it a lot harder than we do, a lot more stress, and the last thing they need is more harassment because the media just tries to paint them as monsters. And I don't think that's okay. And I think we need to shine more positive lights on the homeless people.
So I've seen interviews and videos where people talk about how they became homeless, right? Some left abusive homes. Some got sick, couldn't pay rent. Others lost jobs, couldn't catch a break. And hearing those stories changes how you think. Makes you realize that homelessness can happen to really just anybody, even people who once had good jobs, loving families, right? And I feel like the stories, it makes like the people feel real. You wouldn't like, it makes you think of them not just like those people on the street, or right, they stories like that make us understand more. They help us see that people aren't homeless just because they're bad people or they're lazy people, right? Sometimes life can just hit you hard in unexpected ways, right? We need more media that tells these kinds of stories because they remind us that every person matters, right? In all honesty. And when people care more, they're more likely to help as well. What role do family conflict, abuse, or rejection play in youth homelessness?
This one hits really hard. I personally know someone who has been homeless before and they were my age and they were close to me as a friend. So I know this about this firsthand. People who struggle with fights at home or abuse and just constant struggles might want to get out, or people who are even LGBTQ and they don't feel accepted in their own home. They might choose living on the streets instead of trying to live with their parents still because they feel like their home isn't their home anymore and they're not safe in their own home. And many kids might take being out on the streets and not having a job or risking it being very difficult to find a job rather than ever wanting to be in the home in the first place, which is sad because as Teens should never feel like they should have to be homeless in the first place. Parents, when they choose to have a kid, they know what comes with having a kid, and they should know that if they're going to have a kid, that they need to raise them the right way and not have any reason for them to feel like they have to be homeless.
When these young men and women are growing up in a household that is maybe abusive, maybe they feel unloved, maybe they aren't fed, a lot of times, or not a lot of times, but occasionally, these young people will think they're better off running away. And in some cases, maybe they are better off that way. But a lot of the time, these people have nowhere else to go, these young men and women. They're not old enough to get a job. They don't have enough money to afford even a hotel room. So when they escape from these terrible situations, they are unfortunately put on the street and forced to find a way to live on their own, however they do that. So abuse is a big part of youth homelessness, and the foster home care situation is not much better than living on the street, but it's of course not better than a loving family. So having an abusive or neglectful family can leave a bad first impression and could cause a lot of problems growing up for that kid. My next question for you guys: how do prisons and jails contribute to homelessness upon release?
For me, I think a big reason that prisons contribute to the homelessness population is because people are in basically a never-ending cycle. When they are put in prison, maybe they're being put in prison for being homeless in the first place, and then they get out and they have no money or maybe even no ID or no family to go back home to because they lost their connections in prison because they were in prison for long or whatever it may be. They don't have a social support system anymore. And this is just, it makes it way harder for them. It makes it like a never-ending cycle where you're basically just trying to get back up on your feet, and it's hard to because you don't have a support system. You don't, what's it called? You don't really have people to help you out. And there's no reentry programs that are allowed for many people who have been in prison in the past. It's like a never-ending punishment because some employers don't even employ people who have a criminal record, or people can't buy houses if they have a criminal record, whatever it may be. Just having that on your record just basically affects the rest of your life. And it can be all because you were homeless for a little bit, which is totally wrong.
All right, so another part of this problem is what happens when someone gets out of jail, right? People say you did your time, but when you get out, they're still doing time. They're still getting punished out here, right? You can't find a job because of your record. You can't rent an apartment. You might not even have an ID. And without these things, how are you supposed to start over, right? Many people, that's why they end up homeless after prison, because they have nothing. Even if they're trying to change their lives, right? They don't have a beginning point. The system pushes them to fail once again. If we really believe in second chances, we have to help people when they get out, not just leave them with nothing, right? Giving them support means fewer people living on the streets and fewer people going back to jail. It just helps everyone in general.
All right, so the next question I have for you guys is, what role should businesses play in addressing homelessness?
Businesses could do a lot to help the homeless people. They could help with job skills, communication, teamwork. They could help with giving them proper attires for a job interview, maybe helping them get a hair. Small little things like a haircut and some spare clothes and a restroom to use, and every once in a while some food to eat. These are small things that could really help a homeless person out a lot. If they are struggling, nowhere else to go, these businesses could even hire these homeless people. If they need more employees, they could treat them like humans. These people go into a lot of places and are just immediately turned away. They could do the bare minimum and give them an interview and not judge them based on their appearance. They could give them a place to stay indoors when it's raining, snowing. Just small things that are very small to the business but could be very helpful to the homeless person.
So big companies, they always say they want to give back to the community, right? I say this is their chance, because they could help by working with shelters, nonprofits, right? They could offer job training, or they could fund housing to make it affordable, right? They could even let some employees volunteer, give money to local programs that could actually make a difference. And businesses, they don't have to fix everything, right? It's not their sole responsibility, but they can do something to show that they actually care, right? That kind of effort, it can really change lives. I say if we all live in the same town or city, we should all be helping each other, right? Because homelessness isn't just someone else's problem, it's a community problem. And everyone, especially those with resources, they are able to do their part. Why are poverty rates so much lower in less wealthy countries?
I think that poverty rates are a lot lower in less wealthier countries because many people, they might grow their own food, they might find other needs or ways of helping their family out. And in many other cultures, they rely on their family to help them out a lot of the times, such as in Mexico. I know that for myself, family is very important in Mexico, and they won't let any of their family members sleep on the streets. And whether it be because they just don't have money or they're not well off, family is just so important to us that they won't let that happen. And I think that in the US, it's very individualistic, such as rent, healthcare. Many people just struggle to find other people that will help them out with those things. And it's in our culture, it's kind of just drilled into us from a young age that you need to support yourself. You need to do everything for yourself. And this puts people into a position where they might not know what to do. They might not know how to support themselves. And this can just lead them into a darker hole where they can't get out.
Well, I think that part of the reason why there's less homelessness in poorer communities is a cultural difference. In some cultures, it's normal to live in giant households with 20 plus people, small local villages, treating each other like family, giving everyone else a place to stay if they don't have one, food to eat. I think a lot of other cultures outside of the US are a lot more compassionate when it comes to homelessness and poverty. They understand what being on hard times is and how to help someone through that, or at least try to help. And I think we could learn a lot from the way that they handle homelessness and poverty in those third world countries. Because these people aren't living luxurious lives, but they're living in a house with people that care about them. So it's a lot. That means a lot. My next question for you guys: how can cities balance compassion for the homeless with residencies' safety concern?
I think that one way that policy could change homelessness is that if the government gave people affordable homes in the first place or a place to live in the first place instead of tent encampments or them living in a hostel, that if they're able to just have a place to sleep, a roof over their head at night, that I know studies show that people who have a roof over their head are much more likely to get sober, and they're much more likely to want to find jobs and improve their lives if they have a stable place to live, which is something that the government should provide if they want to improve this problem. And I think that us as poverty abolitionists should try and get this problem to the government to make them do something about it. Because if you don't know where you're going to sleep at night, then how are you supposed to fix anything in the first place?
So if we don't want people sleeping in parks or on sidewalks, then we have to give them better options, right? That means more shelters that feel safe and welcoming, not scary, not crowded. Means tiny homes or places where people can stay longer than just one night, right? It also means making sure people have access to bathrooms, showers, laundries, and stuff like that. Everyone deserves to feel clean and safe, right? People just talk about cleaning up the streets, but pushing homeless people away doesn't solve the problem. Just pushes it off to the side. The problem is still there, right? If we want a real solution, we have to treat people with respect and give them what they actually need. That's how we make communities better for everyone.
So for my last question, I think that I should ask, what is one of the biggest barriers to homeless people overcoming homelessness that isn't money? Because many times we think that money is the only reason for homelessness when it's not.
What's one policy change that could dramatically reduce homelessness overnight?
I think that one way that policy could change homelessness is that if the government gave people affordable homes in the first place, or a place to live in the first place, instead of tent encampments or them living in a hostel, that if they're able to just have a place to sleep, a roof over their head at night, that I know studies show that people who have a roof over their head are much more likely to get sober, and they're much more likely to want to find jobs and improve their lives if they have a stable place to live, which is something that the government should provide if they want to improve this problem. And I think that us as poverty abolitionists should try and get this problem to the government to make them do something about it. Because if you don't know where you're going to sleep at night, then how are you supposed to fix anything in the first place?
I think the simple way to reduce poverty and homelessness in America overnight would be to increase the minimum wage. The minimum wage federally is less than $8 an hour. And for people working 40 hours a week, they should be able to afford to live in a house, to eat food, and to have clean water and have power. A lot of these minimum wage workers have to work multiple jobs just to afford their house. And the people who aren't living in poverty only have to work one job. It's not fair to these people who are working vigorous hours, just like everyone else, don't get enough money to feed their family, feed themselves. Some states are better about it. California, $20 for food, but even that's not enough. They seriously need to think about the minimum wage and what they should do to increase the minimum wage, to give these people more security, give these people enough to pay their rent every month. My last question for the podcast: how can someone safely and meaningfully help a homeless person that they pass every day?
So here's something that not a lot of people realize, right? Not having an ID can trap someone in homelessness, right? Because without an ID, you really can't do anything. You can't get a job, can't rent a place, you can't open a bank account, can't even get into some shelters probably, right? These people, they lose their ID, they could get robbed of their wallet, or they could get evicted and lose all their stuff, right? I don't think getting a new ID is easy either. It costs money and paperwork, right? It's tedious, which are hard to do already if you don't have an address or transportation in general, right? It does only sound like a small problem, but it can create a huge roadblock for these people, right? So helping people get ID is a simple way to make a big difference. It's not even about money, it's about access, right? Without it, people can stay stuck in homelessness, which is not what we want.
I think that one way someone can meaningfully help someone who's homeless without even giving money in the first place is by just acknowledging them and saying hi. Because I think, like I've said before, in society, many times we just shoo these people off and we just look the other way. And I know that I was taught from a young age to not look at homeless people or not get close to them. And I think that that contributes to the notion that we have, or the stigma that we have against them, that they're just bad, that they're all bad people. And that I think that this contributes to the idea that a lot of us have, that we treat them like they're not human and that they're inhumane in some way. But in reality, we're all humans, and we all need someone to just acknowledge us or to give us company. That's one of the main things that people need in their life to be happy. So I think that if we just acknowledge them and say hi and treat them like actual people, that many of them will take that to heart, and many of them will have a better day when, after already having many difficult days in the past, whether it be through homelessness or just not being able to have a place to sleep at night. And homelessness doesn't even have to be just not having a place to sleep at night. It could just be not having a home where you feel safe.